He pressed the eviction notice against his chest, heart pounding as sweat mixed with the barn's stale manure smell on his shirt. Slanting morning light filtered through a grimy window. A broken pocket watch ticked above the door, though its hands had long stopped. The metallic snap of the padlock echoed like a verdict. He had traded dreams for debt. For the first time in decades, he wondered if he'd ever truly plant anything again. 6 months earlier, he had been sowing seeds in sun-baked soil. In 402 days, he'd earned his first $1 million. Jacob knelt in his parched cornfield at dawn, the air heavy with the scent of dry earth and cooling diesel. He twisted the rusty irrigation pump handle. A single drop of water sputtered out, then nothing. A crow cawed overhead as if mocking him. He wiped sweat off his forehead and spat to the ground. Emily, his wife, stood on the old wooden porch of their farmhouse, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. Smoke from the brew curled through the open window, mixing with the morning chill. She watched with furrowed brow as he tried the pump. Jake, the dog, stretched beside her, nostrils flaring at the scent of smoke. "No luck," Jacob said quietly, his tongue clicking. Emily took a step toward the fields. "We have 3 days until the loan payment is due," she reminded him, voice low. Jacob nodded slowly. They owed nearly $5,000 to the bank, and their crop was dying from thirst. The whistle of a distant train stirred the air. Despite decades of dry spells, this one felt endless. Emily handed him the letter the bank manager had sent yesterday. "Maybe they'll extend a grace period," she asked, already knowing the answer. Jacob scanned the typewritten deadline for missed payments. His heart thumped in his ears. No mercy here. He recalled the news. 216 U.S. farm bankruptcies were filed in 2024, a 55% jump from the year before. Jacob closed his eyes. "This is bad," he whispered to himself. Jacob recalled his father's words. "Where there's a seed, there's hope." But now even that felt like an empty promise. They walked to the porch together. The last of the sun struck through a gap in the clouds, lighting the faded paint on the farmhouse door. Jacob took a deep breath, tasting coffee and grass. A curl of tension brushed his mind. What could he sell if the fields yielded nothing? Emily rested her hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure something out," she said, but Jacob felt the doubt gnawing at him. The farmland that had been in his family for generations was slipping through his fingers. That afternoon, he called the local farm cooperative. "Your account is current," the manager said curtly when Jacob asked for a new account line. "There's nothing we can do. Please pay by Friday." Jacob hung up. The world seemed suddenly quiet except for the distant clank of a tractor shutting off. 3 days left. 3 days to save everything. He sank onto the porch swing, the wood creaking under his weight. How could he fix this, with no irrigation and no cash? The clawing question echoed in his mind as the sky dimmed. Subscribe for more inspiring success stories. Jacob woke before sunrise the next Saturday, stiff from days of worry. In the dawn light, he arranged crates of ripe tomatoes, peppers, and squash in his canvas stand at the city farmers market. The aroma of fresh bread and coffee from nearby stalls mixed with soil and herbs. Children laughed on the grass. A street musician tuned his guitar. Jacob slipped the cracked pocket watch from his vest and tucked it away, glancing at the time. By mid-morning, the square was bustling. He greeted neighbors and displayed his produce. An aggressive vendor from a neighboring stand glared. "Out of the way, Grandpa!" The man sneered. These heirloom tomatoes won't sell themselves. A customer picked up a spotted tomato, sniffed it, and handed it back with a shrug. Nearby, a co-op manager said without interest, "We only take wholesale contracts. Limited runs don't pay our bills." Emily stepped forward and offered a polite smile, but Jacob felt bruised. The market bell rang the lunch whistle. At noon, he sat back on a crate, wiping sweat and nibbling a stale pastry he could afford. Nothing had sold yet. His phone buzzed. It was a text from an unfamiliar number. "Remember your dream. Meet me at the old grain silo tomorrow at dawn." He found Emily by their old pickup, wiping soil off her hands. "What's up?" she asked. Jacob showed her the text, voice barely above a whisper. Emily pushed back a strand of hair. "Maybe this is the break we've needed," she said softly. Jacob felt a flicker of hope rekindle. Jacob's heart leapt. Was it a prank, or could it be a miracle? He glanced at the page of notes on his stand. Rent was due Monday, and credit cards loomed ominously. The sun dipped low. Vendors packed up. Jacob folded his arms, feeling more lost than ever. What could this message mean? An itch of hope rose, then hesitation. Was it time to risk everything on a stranger's clue? "You're late!" a voice rasped as Jacob pushed open the grain silo door. Inside, the morning air was damp with mist and the sour tang of rusted iron and dried grain. A figure loomed in the shadows. "Wanted to make sure you cared enough to come," Wendell continued. Jacob's throat went dry. The man was thin as a scarecrow, eyes bright. He extended a hand. "I'm Wendell Reyes. I run a seed conservatory here." Jacob blinked. Wendell Reyes. The name stirred a memory, a seed engineer he had read about long ago. "Wendell, I got your message," Jacob managed, shaking the stranger's warm hand. "Good," Wendell said, easing up. "I saw you at the market. Heirlooms, right? Very special varieties. You're still farming those?" "Yes, sir. Heirloom tomatoes, peppers, corn, all passed down from my grandparents," Jacob replied, voice soft. "Those seeds are gold," Wendell breathed. He unlatched an old crate and held it open. Inside glinted labeled jars. Jacob recognized names: Cherokee bean, green zebra tomato, golden sunflower corn. Each label was a story he had memorized as a boy helping in his grandmother's garden. "I've been saving them forever," Jacob admitted. "I never knew if it would ever matter." "It matters more than you think," Wendell nodded. He scratched at the silver chain around his neck. A small watch fob reflected the dim light, its cracked glass catching Jacob's eye. "I can introduce you to buyers," Wendell said. He thumbed through a worn notebook. "Local markets love these heirlooms, but they want a story and a little marketing. If you package them well, you could hit the big grocery chains, even mail order, but the work is yours." "I will," Jacob said, feeling determination stiffen him. "What do I need to do?" Wendell explained steps, then handed Jacob a business card and a small pouch of bright green tomato seeds. "Do this right, and call me with orders," Wendell said. "I've got your back, but you must follow through." Sunlight broke through the clouds as Jacob left the silo. A job lay ahead. In his truck, Wendell's card burned a hole in his palm. That evening, rain drummed on the tin roof of his barn as Jacob packed tiny seed packets with new purpose. A single thought kept him awake. This plan was his last shot. "I can do this," he whispered to the cracked pocket watch on his workbench. Even as hope surged, one question echoed in the dark barn: could he really pull it off? Weeks later, Jacob's gamble paid off. At the county fair, his booth drew crowds hungry for stories and flavor. People crowded around as he poured heirloom seed packets into gleaming glass jars. The air smelled of sweet corn and wood smoke. He sold out his first batch by noon. Even John, the neighbor who had mocked his produce at the market, gave a thumbs up as he bought a packet. Phones lit up nonstop, orders from a local organic grocer, and an influencer live-streaming his story to thousands. Montage, scenes blurred, Jacob feeding paper through a label press, his family folding boxes and clicking send on online orders. A local news crew interviewed him under a banner that read, "Heritage Harvest," cameras flashing as reporters asked about his journey. By evening, the farm had become a hive of activity. Emily and neighbors pitched in to help pack seeds. Children from town sorted beans at a long table, tossing green pods into piles. Jake's best friend from church arrived with home-baked bread, joining in the buzz. Even skeptics were turning around. The same co-op manager who waved him off now shook Jacob's hand and placed an order. A chain store buyer left a voicemail. Eager to meet, Jacob leaned against his truck, elated, feeling like a champion. But as the cheers faded, new pressure crept in. Investor calls flooded his phone, each promising faster growth in exchange for control. Emily noticed how late he stayed. He kept repeating, "Just one more order," each night. Money would solve the debts, yes, but how much was too much? Still, the tide had turned. Gardens sprouted his seeds, and industry stats confirmed the trend. The U.S. organic seed market was already $1.56 billion in 2024, and heirloom varieties had been gaining in popularity. In less than a year, Jacob's label was in dozens of stores, with thousands of packets selling each month. He punched the air after fulfilling a huge delivery. But staring at the pile of open orders on his table, a cold question sank in. Was this success worth the price? Months passed, and Jacob found himself at an agricultural expo in Chicago, wearing his best suit. The convention hall smelled of coffee and freshly printed brochures. Reporters clicked cameras as he walked past booths. Investors and buyers listened eagerly as he pitched his brand, flipping through a well-worn brochure about his farm's history. Then a big offer came. The president of a nationwide supermarket chain handed him a contract. "Sign here, and we'll give you the funding to globalize your brand," she said, sliding a pen across the table. But she added a condition. "You'll need to drop those organic claims and settle on our schedule." Jacob stared at the paper. The deal would erase the little farm story he had built. He recalled his grandmother's face, and something inside hardened. "I can't betray our values," he said quietly, pushing the contract back. The chain manager raised an eyebrow but nodded curtly. He returned home to find Emily waiting in the kitchen. Their daughter Maggie bounded over, hugging him tight. He kissed the top of her head. "I'm proud of you, too," he whispered. Maggie giggled and ran off to her room. Emily watched them from the doorway, tears glistening in her eyes. Jacob turned to Emily and said softly, "We'll keep doing this our way." He had walked away from millions that day. That night, on the porch, Jacob took out the old cracked pocket watch and turned it over in his hand. The cicadas chirped in the dark fields. The watch still read 5:15, forever paused on a moment. He whispered into the night, "We did the right thing, right?" The question hung heavy in the silence. Did he have what it took to stick to his roots now that so much was riding on this choice? By spring 2028, Jacob's wildest dream was reality. He stood in a Midwest supermarket aisle, watching as a customer scanned a packet of his seeds at checkout. Everywhere he looked, his Heritage Harvest seed packets filled the shelves. This was store number 3000 carrying his brand. The cool air smelled faintly of cucumber and dill from the produce section. Jacob's phone buzzed. A notification that today's sales had just hit a new record. Early the next morning, Jacob woke before dawn. The first light painted the fields golden. Birds chirped in the orchard, dew beating on the corn plants. He got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake Emily. On the windowsill sat the old cracked pocket watch. He picked it up and wound it gently. The gears inside remained stubbornly still, but he chuckled at the familiar ritual. Even if time was frozen on its face, he was finally moving forward. That night, Jacob and Emily sat on the porch steps, the kitchen behind them glowing warm. Fireflies flickered over the fields. "We did it," Emily said, squeezing his hand. Jacob held the watch between his fingers. For a moment, he just breathed the night air scented with pine and earth. The watch still read 5:15, paused forever. Inside, the scent of herb stew wafted from the kitchen. Emily placed bowls of warm soup on the table. Jacob realized that the people he loved were here beside him. "To us," he said quietly, lifting a spoon in silent toast. The farm was saved, the bank loan paid off, and a small idea had blossomed into something much bigger than he ever imagined. Jacob smiled quietly. He touched the watch's glass gently, its quiet tick forever silent. He realized he had fulfilled not just his own dream, but the promise made to those seeds planted long ago by his grandparents. He closed his eyes and whispered, "We finally did it." He had solved the crisis. Jacob wasn't done learning or growing. A year later, he found himself speaking at a community agriculture panel. The hall was packed with young farmers and students eager to hear his story. He described failures and breakthroughs, ending with a grin. "We just kept planting seeds until they took root." Back on the farm, he experimented again, crossbreeding tomatoes resistant to drought, teaching Emily's chemistry background to help test soil nutrients. He even started a small seed exchange program, sharing surplus packets with neighbors and schools. Jacob found himself grateful for the work. He wasn't just selling a product, he was planting hope everywhere. Jacob gazed at the cracked pocket watch one final time. The farm was saved, but after all this success, had the final chapter of his journey truly been written? Subscribe now to follow more incredible second act success stories.